All right, let's take a look at the point light. To follow along, go to Working Files, Photoshop Projects, and open up Lighting. Let's click on the 3D panel. You can see we've got three lights there. Let's turn off the infinite light, turn on the point light, and select it to make it active, and we can see its properties over here. You can tell that something's going on right away. I'll close down this panel. Got a shadow going to the right and shadows going to the left. Not like sunlight, not like the infinite light. That's because this point light is like hanging a light bulb in the middle of your scene, just a light bulb in space. You can't point it at something. It just throws off light in all directions, not just in one plane, but everywhere inside this 3D space. Let's take a look at its properties. Go back over here. Click on the point light again. Properties are very much like the infinite light with an additional thing called light fall off. You've got the color. Change the color, and you can see the change immediately as you make it. I'll click cancel. At the intensity, brighter, darker. And when you change the intensity, it changes the shadow a little bit, but not that noticeably. Turn the shadow on or off. Make it a little softer, maybe about 20% or so is a good number. It'll look kind of messy because we need to render it. So let's render it for a second. I'll just select that area. We'll render that area now. I'll fast forward here so you can see the results. That's how it looks after one pass, and the drop shadows look pretty good. They'll look better if you do a number of passes. I'll Control or Command D to deselect that. And finally, we've got light fall off, and I'll talk about that in a second. So let's go take a look at the controls for this guy, how we move it around. To do that, I click on the selection tool, and there it is, right there. You can tell it's selected because it has a widget on it. The thing is, I don't know exactly where it is. It looks like it's just a few inches from the sphere, right? And just off the side here from the word pasture, but in fact, it's not. It's actually quite a ways away. It's really hard to tell where the point light is relative to objects in your scene. It just isn't that intuitive. So the way that I track it down is using the orthographic view, using the secondary view. Go up to the secondary view here and switch to top, right like that. And then I want to swap views. Now I can track it down. I can see the light coming here, but I still don't see the light itself. If I go down here, I hover there, it says point light. So when you see a circle like that and you hover over it and it says point light, that means that it's off the screen. This is not the point light. This is the spotlight. So I've got point light there, and I need to find it. If I click on it, it won't find it for me. So I'm going to do Control or Command minus to go out one notch here. And there it is. I click on it now, once, twice, and I've selected it. But if I want to use the Z-axis to move it in, I can't. It's off screen again. So I do Control or Command minus again. And now I got it. I can grab this little Z-axis and push it in like that. But I'd rather use one of these tools up here to move it around. This one on the left is called the drag tool. The drag tool drags in this plane, so I got the drag tool selected. And I don't need to click on top of it to move it. I can click anywhere as long as it's active, and that'll move it around like so. So you see how the shadows move there? See, I'm between these objects now, between the text and between the sphere. But I don't really know how high up I am. I think I'm pretty high up by the shadows, but I really can't tell. So at least I've got that far. Now I'm going to switch views again to the perspective view. And I can see I'm a little bit above things there. If I want to see it really more accurately, I can go over here. Let's say go to the front, for example, and switch views again. Now I get a chance to see how it is relative to the whole scene there. I can pull it down a bit like that. And now I go back to the perspective view. There you go. So now we got a better view of the things, and now I can move it around like this, left and right, a little bit up and down. The nifty little feature for the point light is that it has light fall off. It lends an aura of realism because the light can sort of diminish over some distance. So let's move the light to in front of the letter P. So I'm going to switch to the top view over here. I'm going to switch views. I want to position this light by taking this drag tool and dragging it right there by the letter P. Switch views again. Now I want to bring it down just a little bit so the shadows go off in the distance, a little bit off in the distance, something like that. Now I want to have the light diminish over the distance. Now it kind of is now just based upon the position, but I want to make that more dramatic. So to do that, I click this little checkbox, turn on light fall off, and something pretty strange is going to happen here. And these huge circles show up, and what effect do they have? How do you control them? If you hover over them, they turn yellow, which looks like, okay, now I can control them. But I click, they go away, so it's really not a way to control them. If I try to hover there looking for some kind of a cursor saying you can control them here, hard to find that cursor if it exists. So, nope, you're not going to control them here. You're going to control them over here with these little sliders. Two huge numbers here, 5,000, as you can see, another 5,000 off by only 2/10. That's because the inner and the outer fall off are just 2/10 of whatever this is. These numbers don't mean anything particular. You'd think they'd mean pixels or something like that, but the folks at Adobe say they have no meaning at all. They're just a number, just a relative number. So the first order of business is to drop the inner fall off way down. Not a very exact slider, but just pull it in like that. And not much is going to happen here. You're just going to pull it down to some region that you can sort of tell it's going to be about that wide. But now you need to bring in the outer where things drop off to the point where they stop displaying, but they do drop off. And right now, it's way too wide to see any drop off. It drops off way out here instead of in close. So I open up the outer. I want to bring it down to something close to that number there. So let's drag it in. There you go. Now you see it drop off. See the letters get darker there? Right about there, let's say. Zoom in a bit, Control Command plus. Now you see how the light drops way off. You can slide the outer out a little bit like this. Now I can see it this way. Don't have to see the little white lines there. Now the one thing about changing the outer, notice what happens to the shadows. They are cut off because the outer there is slicing off the shadows. It really should affect only the lights, but unfortunately it affects the shadows. So I need to pull it out farther than I might want to make sure I've got the shadows already extended. Look over here too. There, we finally got them all the way out here. So we had to kind of increase the space that I included inside the outer range just to make sure the shadows didn't have these hard edges to them. And now let's render that, because right now it looks awful, right? Very noisy. But it should get better here in just a moment. I'll fast forward here so you can see the finished result. So that's one pass. It looks pretty good. I think that little fall off looks pretty realistic. I like that effect. There's one more cool thing you can do is that you can put the light between objects, behind one in front of another. Do Control Command D here, and we'll go back to the selection tool. Here's our light again. I'm going to turn off the light fall off because it kind of gets in the way as we try to move things around. I'm going to take a look at the top view again. So I'm going to go over here and make sure that top is selected. Switch views. I want to move the light between these two objects. So I've got my drag tool selected. Just kind of drag it over there. Right in between that globe and the text. Let's go back to the default perspective view. Now you can see the globe is lit from behind. It's almost as if the globe is emitting light. I can pull this down a little bit like that. Looks like it's glowing on the word pasture. I think that is so cool that you can do that. You can slide a bit to the left like that. Give a little bit of light to the globe. Notice how, though, what happens when you do this, our shadow hits an edge. It's hitting the horizon line of this ground plane, which is not very good looking. You can overcome that by putting in a custom ground plane, but you probably don't want a shadow that goes that high up the wall, right? Nevertheless, if you want it to go that high, and it does get cut off by the horizon line, put in a custom backdrop there, a custom ground plane to let it go beyond that limit. I'll put up here, though, so it's more realistic looking like that. Finally, I want to show you how you can track down the missing light if it's just way off course. So I'm going to go back over here to the top view. I'm going to switch views, do Control or Command minus a couple of times, and take our light using the drag tool and dragging it way the heck out of here. Then going back to this view. Now notice how things look kind of strange now due to the distant light. I want to track down the light, and you see that it's off screen here because there it says, I'm off screen, here I am, come find me. Well, the way you can find it when it's way off screen if you don't want to track it down is to click on this little button over here, Move to View. I'll click on that, and lo and behold, there it is. It's in the view. But once again, you can't be really sure where that light is. It looks like it's tucked away right next to the U there, and maybe just to the left of the sphere, but in fact, it's kind of off in the wilderness again. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go up here and make sure this is the top, okay, and then click over here to replace things or swap things. There we go. And again, it's way down here. And we could track it down the way we did earlier in the lesson, but I want to show you a couple of shortcuts to simplify that process. So I'm going to go back here and get the perspective view. Now I showed you in the infinite light lesson how to point the infinite light using the Alt or the Option key. You can do the same thing with a point light, except that it's not quite the same results. I'll hold my cursor over the letters here, press the Alt key in Windows, the Option key in Mac. And now when I click here, it's not just going to point the light, it's going to put it right on top of that spot. That's pretty darn close, but that's a quick way to bring the light exactly where you want it. I kind of like that. Let's pull that away a bit here. You can also use the shadow to position your light, just as you do with an infinite light. I'm going to take the shadow down to 0% just to make it a little bit easier to manipulate it. All you need to do is just hold on the Shift key and then drag the shadow around like that. You don't have to drag right on a shadow. You can drag down here, but it's kind of more intuitive, I guess, to be right on top of the shadow like that. So there you go. You can get the light right on a spot, right on the sphere, for example, holding down the Alt or the Option key and then getting right there. Putting it over here in the P, for example. Or you can position it using the shadow. I'm going to pull it away a little bit because it's kind of hard to position the shadow when it's that big. Shift key, bring the shadow down like so. There you go. I really like the point light because you can position it between objects to backlight one and put the light in front of another one. and because you can use the fall off to make it look more realistic.